Good evening, everyone, and welcome to part one of the Denver Mayoral Candidate Forum brought to you by the Hampden Heights Civic Association. My name is Mark Orrs, and I am president of the HHCA, and I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. In this runoff election, there are two candidates running to represent Denver as mayor, Kelly Brough and Mike Johnston. Each candidate will be allocated a total of 30 minutes of time with us, starting with Kelly Brough this evening in part one, and followed in part two by Mike Johnston, which will be on Wednesday, May 17th at 7 p.m. I will now post each candidate's official campaign website in the chat feature so that you can visit their websites and learn more about their campaign policies and stances. I will start each forum by asking the candidates to introduce themselves, and then I'll move on to questions that have been submitted and rank voted by members of the HHCA. And please note that a recording of tonight's forum will be made available to the public after the event. Kelly, your 30 minutes begins now. Please open with up to 5 minutes of general introduction.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful. I'll just share 3 reasons why I would ask for your vote and your support, and then I look forward to your questions and conversation. For me, my professional background really has prepared me for mayor. And, I think like so many of you, I have serious concerns about the situation I find our city in today. I think we can do better when it comes to housing people and particularly sheltering those who are unhoused. I feel we can do much better around affordable housing for the range of people who work in our city, I believe should be able to live in our city. And I think we can improve the safety in our neighborhoods and our communities. But that comes from my belief, and that comes from my experience. I've been the head of HR for the city of Denver. So I really understand the city worker. I understand the culture of the city and how to support the team. And frankly, I love being a city employee, and I'd love to be one again. I also was John Hickenlooper's chief of staff when he was mayor of Denver. During that time, I not only helped manage the city through the Democratic National Convention, which is just a huge undertaking for a city, but I balanced the budget in response to the Great Recession. And I understand how to prioritize needs in the city, especially when budgets are reducing, which is much more challenging than when revenue is growing. And for me, I always put our residents first. And I think if you were here in 2009, you probably appreciated the budget we built and the minimal impact it had on your lives, even in a crisis. The second reason I'd ask you to consider supporting me is my lived experience. I look around at the issues that so many in Denver are struggling with today, and I understand those issues. I can look at families who lost a loved one to violent crime, and I know how hard it is to put the pieces of their life back together because I lost my father to violent crime. My family received government assistance. And I look at people today in our city who need support and help from their government. And I understand how important it is that we be there to deliver that support and help, but not make people feel less than because of it. I understand how people might give up hope today when they're struggling with issues in their family of addiction. And my husband struggled for the 25 years we were married with an addiction, and my girls and I lost him to suicide. I share these with you not because I think my family is a victim or because I'm looking for sympathy. I share it because I understand what it takes to help families navigate these kind of challenges. And so many families in Denver are struggling through these issues. And I know for me, I not only understand the strength of the human spirit, I've lived it, but I see it in Denver and I see our resiliency. And I understand how we as a community can help our families navigate these challenging moments that we're in. And then I guess the last reason I share with you is, while I think I'm professionally prepared to do the work of being your mayor and on day one can begin that work, I understand the unique moment we're in. I've never run for office before, but probably most importantly, I'm not running for another office. I'm only running for mayor. And I think the next mayor has some tough decisions ahead of her. And I can give you with confidence, I can tell you, I'll make every decision about what's best for our residents and our city, never about a political future. I hope I could earn your vote in our conversation tonight, and I invite your questions.
On mute. Great, thank you so much. So as I noted, we will now turn to questions that have been submitted from our members. We will get to as many questions as possible, so the more succinct your responses, the more questions we can get to. The first topic, which had several different questions related to it, was related to crime and policing. And I'll start with one question related to an incident that occurred here just last night. Last night, just 1 block away from the Hampden Heights Swim and Tennis Club, 5 people were shot. This was not the first incident of violent crime in the apartments surrounding our neighborhood, where gunshots are heard with some regularity and other shootings have occurred. What are your priorities for reducing violent crime? And what are some specific recommendations for what you would recommend an RNO like ours could do to help address violent crime in our neighborhood? And I've also pasted that in the chat.
Thanks, Mark. For me, community safety is probably, well, it is one of the top reasons I'm running for office. My background comes out of public safety. I've served on the Denver Civil Service Commission. I've worked with police officers as chief of staff. I took those phone calls in the middle of the night when our community was facing an issue like you just described. I am very proud to receive the endorsement of the almost 1,500 police officers in Denver today. And in our discussions, here's some of the things that we've come up with to try to help quickly improve the safety in our communities. Let me first make sure you know we're about 150 officers short in our police department, a little bit less today because we just graduated 36. But without those officers, we're short-staffed. We're not at our authorized strength of 1,600. So the first thing I would do is immediately add mental health professionals. We still have calls our officers are being called out to that really could be handled by someone who's a mental health professional. And that would free our officers up to be able to more proactively be dealing with some of the issues like you described. A second issue that we would look at immediately is how we might use technology to assist us, again, with the goal of freeing our officers up so they can be in community helping address the issues you're facing. Some of the things that could do that would be, instead of an officer giving tickets for expired license plates or car registration, we could have someone else do it. It does require that I change the law, but I also could use more photo radar and for speeding, which we know is a rampant issue in our city, and we just don't have the officers to increase compliance. That would include red lights, school areas, issues like that. And I would work with an RNO just like yours to discuss where we think those issues are and where we most appropriately could deploy those resources. And then finally, I would engage our officers more in community to talk about additional strategies we could take, particularly around gun violence. I've supported the steps we've taken at the Capitol so far. I supported going further than what we went. I think there's some additional steps we might be able to take to try to reduce the guns on our streets. And I would continue to explore those strategies, including buyback strategies that other cities are having some success with. And then this would be another place that I, with the department, would work with you as an RNO to explore what else we might do. All of that is about responding to crime. Just as much of my administration will focus on preventing crime, so we actually reduce the issues we have to respond to. And I'm happy to talk more about those things and some of my experience in doing that where I've had success.
Great, thank you. We do have more questions where you might be able to get into that. Next, a yes or no question. Do you support defunding the police, where that is defined as reallocating or redirecting funding away from the police department to other government agencies funded by the local municipality?
Yeah, I know you want a yes or no question. This drives me crazy in running for office and probably makes me a terrible candidate. But my answer would be, I'll answer the question by giving you an example in my career of what I actually did. One summer, when I was chief of staff, my chief of police came to me and said he was seeing a rise in violence among our youth. And instead of increasing our officers, which is the typical response to address it, was in particular, he was worried about gang violence. Instead, what we did is, for the first time in the city's history, we opened our rec centers for free. I tracked that summer youth committing crime and youth as victims of crime, and we saw both go down. There are very relevant strategies that can reduce crime and prevent it, and I will put resources into those things, but I don't see them as a trade-off necessarily. I think we fund our police based on what you need to have in community to keep you safe and to respond to issues when you need them the most. So that's why I don't feel it's an either or. I guess I feel it's a yes and to get it right. And sometimes I might be moving resources from one to the other as we try to figure out that right balance together.
All right, we have two remaining questions related to crime. The last two are more related to nonviolent crime. I'll put them in the chat as well. The first is, how can we make a serious and quick dent in the nonviolent crime situation, car thefts, porch pirates, thefts of items from grocery stores in plain sight, etc. And the second question is related to our public transit. Recently, my family and I have been unable to utilize the H line into downtown on the RTD. Some of the reasons we are not able to rely on this is because there are not enough drivers for the light rail. But also I've seen drug use on the train, homeless sleeping on the train, bodily fluids, etc. What will you do if elected mayor to solve this dangerous situation for public commuters?
All right, so let's start with what we call not, the nonviolent crimes, but to try to address them. Some of it is eyes on the street, certainly. And I will tell you, with more people working from home, the increase in the thefts is directly, it is not connected to eyes on the street. It's directly connected to just more deliveries happening to people's homes throughout the day. And so this is a space where I think we have to really work with our officers to explore what have they seen that works, or our community. What have you seen that might be working and improving? Some people have the protected package kind of drops that help protect packages, delivering to close locations that can go indoors. But I don't have all the answers for that one. I know I'm supposed to as a candidate, but I actually think I should always tell you the truth. With regard to car theft, though, this is one where I've spent a lot of time talking with officers. And I don't believe it is fair to say that a less expensive car, is less of an impact on a family. I actually would argue today it's quite the opposite. And so I strongly support and push for the change in state law that would make the theft of a car a felony, so that we're not turning people right back out. Because if you have a car worth less than $2,000 a year, you probably don't have full insurance coverage on it. You might need that car for work. You probably don't have as many alternatives. My whole point being, you've devastated a family. And so I think we have to constantly relook at what we have sort of fundamentally said historically, and that is, if something is more valuable, it's a greater crime. And to me, car theft is a great example of, we got that policy wrong, and the adjustment in it should help. I also got the chance on Saturday night to do a ride along with an officer and see some new technology for detecting stolen vehicles and license plates in particular. And it can work so much faster than officers trying to do it manually. Extremely effective. And so I think investing more in technology that catches thieves faster and then has greater consequences for them. On the RTD issue, I couldn't agree more with you. I've even taken the step to meet with some of the RTD directors and the general manager of RTD to talk about some of the safety issues. Because if we really are going to address climate and get us all out of our cars using alternatives, we have to make transit safe. I think there's a couple of things. One is, we know it's safe. It feels safer when you're with more people. And one of our problems today is nobody is taking transit. And it is pretty clear when you talk throughout our region, one of the barriers is cost. And so RTD has put out some new rates and fares. I started talking with them last year about the potential of how that might be adjusted. I think we're heading in the right direction, but honestly, I'd be interested in every student, high school and college, who rides for free. And I'd be interested in creating a rate where every single employer can afford to buy that pass, so every employee has it. And I think we might be able to start to get the numbers on it, combined with the transit police that we have, to improve safety. The last thing I'll say is, we have to revamp our shelter system for people who are unhoused today. because many of them are kicked out of their shelter during the day and they ride our trains just to have shelter throughout the day. And so moving to 24-hour shelters should also help.
Great, thank you. Our next topic of interest was related to business revitalization, specifically on and around Hampton Avenue, where several businesses have closed. The first points this out, with so many businesses closing down on Hampton between Tamarack and Havana, how would you plan to attract the area and attract new businesses? Or more generally, another question that is quite lengthy that I'm posting here and I won't read it all, is essentially getting to the same point, and ends by essentially saying, if elected, what is your plan to help make sure our neighborhoods and business districts reach their full potential so that Southeast Denver residents have opportunities to reinvest their hard-earned paychecks back into our neighborhood?
Yeah. This is an area, I was the president and CEO of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. I took that job in 2009 when we were facing a crisis of companies closing and loss of jobs, probably the greatest job loss we've had in Colorado since the 80s. And if I go back and look, it might have been greater than the 80s even. All that to say, my key role there was to attract business who would invest. And the real investment of business is it brings jobs and it fills those storefronts like you're focused on. Business improvement districts can be a strategy to do that, where we try to create some investment that makes areas more attractive. But first you have to get the retail in it. One of the strategies that can really work is really getting rents very, very low so that new entrants to the market, in essence, new companies, new startups, are willing to come in and see if they can make a go of it with less risk so the rents aren't as high. And the truth is, often owners in these situations are willing to do that, and to create those leases in new ways, so that they're both taking a little risk together just to get people into the location and revitalize the region. I would focus on how could we help that happen along Hampden, but frankly, along many storefront areas throughout our city. And one upside I think that we may have in trying to do this is we're seeing more and more businesses want to relocate into neighborhoods because you're not coming into one centralized business district as much as we used to historically. So I think there's great potential for what might have, been downtown once, businesses who now might be very interested in being in other business districts around our city. And then the last thing I'll mention is we know women and people of color don't start businesses at the same rate in our economy. And if we could support women and people of color in the right ways to ensure they do that, it's a huge economic benefit. You will see in my administration, we'll focus on ensuring women and people of color are getting the opportunity to compete for jobs, to be in these spaces, to grow a business and start a company, and to be able to get the certifications that allow them to compete for specific kinds of contracts in government. And not just Denver city government, but RTD, DPS, CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation. Sorry for all the acronyms. But those are some of the things I think we could work on together.
Great, thank you. Our next topic is around homelessness, including homelessness encampments. And I will first ask you 3 yes or no questions, and I'd ask you to try and keep it to a yes or no this time, only because we then have a more open-ended question from a member where you can expand upon any of your answers. The first yes or no question, do you agree with Denver's urban camping ban? If not, would you seek to overturn it?
I would not overturn it.
Do you agree with forcibly clearing encampments that are in violation of the urban camping ban?
Well, I guess every violation technically is in violation of the urban camping ban. I think what you're talking about is sweeping based on public health or public safety issues. And I do support making sure we're addressing the horrific conditions people are in.
The last yes or no question before the bigger question. Do you agree with forcibly arresting or committing people who do not agree to go into shelter or housing options provided by the city or refuse to go to treatment for mental health or drug issues?
Only as a last resort if their life is in danger.
All right. And then the broader question, which has some local context to it, is now in the chat. Over the course of this election cycle, homelessness has been a hot topic and one of legitimate concern. While a lot of the tension is centered around Civic Center Park and Cap Hill, we are seeing the impacts of homelessness in Southeast Denver as well. Evidence of homeless encampments are found regularly now in Hensel Park, including trash, needles, and other drug-related paraphernalia along trails and creek banks. How do you plan to enforce existing laws related to public camping while also working to tackle the root causes of this epidemic so we can solve it once and for all?
Yeah. Well, that's a well-worded question. That's exactly the challenge before us. And so what I did is I looked around the nation at what other cities are doing who are doing a better job of housing and sheltering people. And they do a few things differently. And I would do exactly the things that I see those other cities doing. One is ending unsanctioned camping, just what you described throughout our city. And the preference, of course, is to get everyone indoors and sheltered, but we don't have enough shelters and we don't have the right shelter for everyone today. So I would temporarily sanction locations where I would require everyone who's camping in our city to get to those safe sites. I would use outreach workers to move people. I would move them with their partners, with their families, with their pets, so that we would get people to voluntarily, as much as possible, go to those safer locations. If people are unable to make the decision, maybe they're intoxicated or they're high and they can't take care of themselves, I would use Denver Cares, which does require and take people in to help them be in a safe location when they're in that condition. And if in freezing temperatures or conditions that we don't believe people would survive, I would arrest or use the law to get people to a safer site. But probably more importantly, what I would really do is focus on the region and working together with other mayors and cities, because we know this issue, as you point out, is not just downtown, even though we have a concentration of the issue in downtown because that's where all the services are for our region. I also need other cities to help us house and shelter people and provide the support and service that people need. 6 mayors in the metro area have endorsed me and my homeless plan, saying we'll do this work together with you, Kelly. And I would also focus on prevention. We know it's much less expensive to keep someone housed than to try to take someone out of homelessness and deal with the trauma and the impact on their lives. And a number of cities in this nation are doing some very interesting work around prevention that is extremely effective, and it's much less expensive and much less trauma for families. And I would focus on that.
Great, thanks. Our next question is somewhat broad. What do you believe are the top 3 to 4 issues facing Denver, and how do you propose to address them? And if you differentiate between overall Denver and this council district or Southeast Denver more broadly, but basically your top 3 or 4 issues.
My top 3 issues, I would say, are also true in your council district. They are unhoused, homelessness in our city, housing affordability, that people who work here can't afford to live here, and public safety or community safety.
While we're on the topic of affordable housing, we've a question on that from one of our members. Housing affordability has become a major issue in Denver in recent years. Over the long term, I'm worried my kids might not have the same opportunity to continue to live in Southeast Denver and raise a family in the same neighborhood they grew up in. As a candidate, what is your plan to reduce the cost of living in Denver and make sure it remains a viable and inclusive community where middle-class families can still make a life for themselves?
Yeah, well, this is exactly why I'm running. I came here from Montana with my husband, and being able to buy a home, like whoever asked this question, changed the course of our lives, right? This is how we build wealth in this nation. And today we're removing it from our children or the next generation completely. And so I'm very interested in this. The product we have leased of in Denver is a condo, a for sale multifamily unit. And just to give you context, about 4% of the housing units built in Denver today are condos. In other cities of our size, it's about 20%. This is an entry level, so people can start to own homes. And I would propose I build it as your mayor. I've seen this done. I got the chance to tour it in Munich, where they built on a surface parking lot. And they kept the parking. It was almost like they built covered parking. They kept the parking at the lot. It's publicly owned land, so you're removing the price of the land. It's like a land bank or a land trust, and you can build a for sale product on top, where families could live in neighborhoods they never could have afforded. Kids can go to schools that they never could have accessed. And if you look around our city, we own a lot of parking lots like this, which are not a fabulous use in a city, but we wouldn't have to get rid of them. We could build on top of them. So I want you to think about libraries, police stations, firehouses. Denver Public Schools could be a partner, and they've already reached out and expressed an interest in the potential of working together. RTD at those light rail stops where we know we should be building densely, and that's where we should have multifamily and we should have for sale, not just apartments. So you could expect to see me working throughout the city to ensure our children get the chance to live in the neighborhoods that they were raised, and build wealth at the same time.
And related to that, could you speak to us a little bit about the single family zoning policy that is going through at the state level and your feelings on that?
So it's been defeated. I understand why the governor filed it, but as I said from the very beginning, I would like the chance as mayor to work with my residents on building housing how we think it should be built. Density is important, but where it goes and how we grow really matters. And that density should be where we've made those investments in our light rail stops, major bus routes, closer to those commercial areas, that's really where density should be. And what I'll be asking every neighborhood in the city is to help us approve building housing that's affordable in those areas, so we can actually get the kind of housing we need for everyone who works in our city to be able to live here.
Great. We have one last question from our community, and then I invite anyone here. We have a few minutes left only, but if anybody here has a final comment or question, please feel free to raise your hand or to enter the question in the chat. But the final question from our community: how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the ways I really am different is, I've run the city before and I know it extremely well. I've spent more than half of my career working for the city of Denver, and I really do understand the city. And I feel very confident on day one, I can begin to make the changes we need. And frankly, I don't think we have a lot of time. I think we have real work ahead, and I think it requires someone who on day one can begin that work. And I guess the other thing I would say is that experience, I think, also informs my policies. And so I think they're very realistic, but also aspirational, that we share the vision of our city that we want to achieve. And I think because of that experience, I have a pretty thoughtful approach on how we can get there together.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anybody have a follow-up question or a response? All right. This concludes tonight's part one of the Mayoral Forum. We thank you very much, Kelly, for joining us and taking time out of your evening, especially when we're competing with the Nuggets playoffs game.
I'm sorry.
We'll be sure to share this far and wide and make sure we get as many eyes on it as possible. Thanks so much for taking time out of your campaigning to campaign with us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you all so much. And thank you for choosing Denver. I hope I get the chance to work with you.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Have a great night.
Thank you.
too.
Thanks, Mark, for putting this together again.
Joining.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Bye, everybody.